So I've gone down the baby reindeer rabbit hole. Buckle up. This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We're your hosts, Tyler
and Chris.
For anyone that is still out of the loop on this, first off, stay with us. We're going to try and avoid spoilers. Might be a few, but for anyone out of the loop, Baby Reindeer was a mini-series put out on Netflix back in April.
Yeah, I think so.
It was written and starring Richard Gadd, and it was somewhat based off of some personal events in his life of dealing with his personal struggles and a stalker. But it's what's outside this show that is what is really interesting part of this and has blown up over the last few months. But if you've not watched it, up to you whether or not to watch it, then come back or stay with us. Again, we're going to try and avoid spoilers. This is more about the intrigue surrounding it. But if you've not seen it, just a little warning going in. Some of the subject matter is a little heavy, depending on your sensitivity levels. So just keep that in mind and do your own research.
Yeah, there's a lot of drug use for any sober people who are former drug addicts. There's that. There's sexual abuse. And there is stalking is the main point of the show. And I saw an ad for this show. And I think it was on top of one of the podcasts I was going to watch. It was on YouTube. And it looked like a horror show, really, like either true crime or so. I didn't know it was a true story, but it was just like a small clip from him going to the police. And it's really dark. The show itself is actually kind of a black comedy because he does work in humor, like stuff that's legit humorous in it. That's difficult because the rest of it is so extremely dark. So I'd made the decision, and I saw the name Baby Reindeer, and I was like, there's nothing that's going to be called Baby Reindeer that is anything less than horrifying. So I am not watching this. Then a couple weeks later, I see on Popcorn Planet, Andy Signor does a little piece on this, and it was really short. He really just wanted to say, it was almost not much more than an update and an advertisement, like, I'm going to be going on Piers Morgan, and there was the Baby Reindeer, the woman from Baby Reindeer has been on Piers Morgan, and I'm going to be back on here to tell you more later. And I was like, what the hell is this about? So then I was like, oh, it's a true story? I didn't look much into it. That weekend I watched the show, and I watched it in about 2 days. I think I was working that weekend, so I didn't started watching it before work. If I hadn't had to work, I probably would have just watched it straight through like you and I did. I was telling, this is the first thing for this podcast, at least, that me and Tyler sat down and watched the whole thing together. And when we did, I was on vacation that week, and I thought we would watch it in 2 bits, that we'd watch a bit of it Monday morning and the rest of it, finish it off on Tuesday. And at no point did Tyler show any exhaustion or fatigue at all.
It was one of those things. It's like some of the subject matter, like we said, is rough, but it's almost like a train wreck. It's like once you see it, it's like you can't stop.
You cannot look away. It's already won awards. I think it won 3 of the 4 Emmys it was nominated for as of recording. We're recording this in mid to late September. So, and you and I watched it in August. I've watched it several times now because I watched it on my own. I watched bits and pieces first. I watched it on my own, and then I showed bits and pieces to my girlfriend, and then eventually we just watched the whole thing. I got mildly obsessed with this case, and not like for the same reasons that other people did, because there was no mystery. It was already solved. This is a strange case because the writer of the show and the star of the show, Richard Gadd, and this is an account of the things that happen in his life. It begins with, this is a true story. Now, I want to also, for anybody who's doing some basic research on this, there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of slightly wrong information, a lot of majorly wrong information, probably no matter which side you're looking at it from. I looked this up just last night because when I was trying to find out about the disclaimer at the end of the episodes, and what people have been saying about the beginning of it is this is a true story, which, yes, That is what it says. This is a true story. And that is left to wide interpretation. It's not, people make these semantic arguments, and that's part of bigger discussion. The semantic argument of this is a true story versus based on true events versus based on a true story versus, what are some of the other ones I can't think of? Inspired by, whatever. This is a true story. The AI overview on Google right now reads, the Netflix show Baby Reindeer includes post-credit disclaimer that some aspects of the show may have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes. However, the show begins each episode with the words, this is a true story. This is not true. The first episode begins with this is a true story, not every episode. And that was always the point of one of my arguments about the semantics of this when argued in court, which it will be. Spoiler for this, real life. The real life Martha's going to court to sue, not Richard Gadd, but Netflix. Interesting that too. I think she's still in love with Richard, but that's neither here nor there. Just using her own words. That's not my opinion. Saying what she said. Anyway, if you say something to me 7 times, and then you say something else 1 time, I think the 7 carries more weight. Yeah. And not only that, so one of the things that we should discuss is the way that Netflix is designed, especially if it's a series. Once it hits, if you have another episode in the series, there's a button, and once it hits the credits, it starts a little bar. Over. Yeah, it begins a little countdown bar, and then it skips to the next episode. This happened, the skipping happens before it reaches the disclaimer at the end. And then, even then, some people have, there's some contention with what the disclaimer actually says if you do read it, if these internet sleuths actually looked for that, which is all characters in this work are, it does not end with all this. It says, this program is based on real events. However, certain characters, names, incidents, locations, and dialogue have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes. I think that's pretty fair, actually. That feels pretty standard to me.
I think that should be obvious. I mean, this is clearly not a documentary.
No, yeah. He has changed even his own name, which I feel like gave him more artistic license. How do you compress 7 or 8 years into 7 episodes of a show? They're not even hour-long episodes. They're closer to just under 30 to 40 minutes each. So the first thing after that, there is, what you start with is the show, obviously, if you're going to do that. It's, Richard Gadd's account of what happened to Donnie Dunn, someone who is a stand-up comedian. And he's just trying to break into stand-up comedy and works at a bar. He offers a woman a cup of tea for free, and it goes from there. She immediately, it looks like what happens is she falls for him hard because she has some mental instability. I'm just saying from an outsider's perspective. At the end of the day, at the end of what happened from 2014 to 2017, what he has received, and this is the official number from Richard Gadd from the behind the scenes of Baby Reindeer, 41,071 emails / texts, 350 hours of voicemails. And I'm glad I checked this. I double-checked this because some people have misread it to say 350 voicemails. 350 hours of voicemails.
Big difference there.
744 tweets, 18 of which are still available to look at because she lost the information to that account, so she could not delete them. 46 Facebook messages, 4 fake Facebook accounts, 106 pages of letters. I'm glad I checked that as well because some accounts have said 106 letters, simplifying it as that. And it all started with 1 cup of tea. When you finish the show, if you want to go into season 2, which does not exist, you go to the Piers Morgan interview. The Piers Morgan interview, he sits down with Martha, and I think it's pretty clear this woman has something very serious wrong with her. I don't know. I am not a clinician. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist.
And to clarify for anyone tagging along that's not watched it, he's referring to his stalker.
Yes. Okay. So not long after the show comes out, Martha Scott in the show is self-identified. Fiona comes out and says, I am the real life Baby Reindeer, the real life Martha, and contacts Piers Morgan and wants to do an interview. From the beginning, almost the very first thing she says, well, not the very first thing she says, but once they get into the facts of the case, she can't keep her story straight / contradicts herself within sentences at times. I'm not going to do a rundown of the entire interview, but I do want to go over a few notes citing this because she actually has a bit of a fan base. There are some people who, not only Popcorn Planet covers a lot of stuff, but there's a few other people that I want to cite later on who have stayed up on the case and are reading out stuff from her Facebook accounts just to show some of the validity of that Richard hasn't made this up. And Richard isn't the only person who has come forward since then either, just to say he's not the only person who has fallen victim to this woman, allegedly. At the 4-minute mark, she states that she's only met him 2 to 3 times. I want to be very clear on that. And that she, quote, doesn't know him, unquote. At the 7-minute mark, she states that she thinks he wanted to divert attention away from his allegation. Now, here's the thing with that. When she said that, now that I'm remembering this, when I saw a clip of this, it was before I watched the show. And that's really what made me extremely intrigued, because I thought, had he somebody? Like, here's the thing. He's not accused of anyone. The only thing Richard Gadd is accused of is sensationalizing his personal story. The way that she worded that, I think, was very intentional.
Yeah.
He alleges he was Richard Gadd. So that was an interesting turn of phrase, to be sure. She then denies sending him anything. And I worded my notes very carefully because she was very deliberate in some of her dialogue here. Piers pushes back on her some, not as much. I think he was more than fair. More than fair with her. I think he could have pushed back on her much harder. She said she may have emailed him, unquote, and may have tweeted him years and years ago, admitting to 18 tweets that are still up. And at the 11-minute mark, she says, but we were all friends. It was banter.
So you don't know him, but you're friends.
Met him 2 or 3 times. Yeah, interesting. 9 seconds later, she says she didn't write any letters. At 12 minutes, she admits she wrote one. So, yeah, 1 minute later. At 14 minutes, 29 seconds, she admits to less than 10 emails. After this, she also accepts that this character cannot be her because the differences are so great. Now, this is also something that has confused a lot of people because in there, he was like, well, if none of this stuff is the case, this character can't even be you then. And she accepts this and says, no, it can't be. Then what's your lawsuit based on? Walk away.
So either it is you or it isn't.
At 16:26, she admits to going to one of his comedy shows. Just one. A man who she didn't really know and had only met 2 or 3 times. Interesting that. At the 27-minute mark, Morgan asks about the tweets. One included the curtains comment, this contentious joke that was made that he depicts in the show because it's still up to look at, where she says she actually needs her curtains hung at home. It's not a euphemism. But then he makes the joke at the bar he works at where she would come to hang out. I'll hang your curtains, making it a euphemism in front of everybody. And then she latched onto it and tells him later, I need my curtains hung badly. And we all know what that's referring to. Feel free to make those types of jokes with your friends, not at work. To it. Okay, so one of the tweets, she includes the comment about the curtains, to which she responds, we were trying to encourage him. Someone she doesn't know him, met him 2 or 3 times, but to encourage him for his comedy show, she's making these sexual jokes to him on Twitter. Okay. At minute 35, Morgan returns to the emails and voicemails to press her again, and she says, quote, doubts it very much, I just don't think so. You don't think so. At some point she says, I have a photographic memory, but she doesn't think she sent these emails or voicemails. okay, and claims he must have been recording her when they were around each other at the bar he worked at. I guess those 2 or 3 times may have lasted for days and days. Then only 1 minute later, when Morgan reminds her that they can easily find out if it was her that sent them, if her phone was given up for analysis, she says, quote, "Even if it is true, I didn't lunge across the bar," unquote. This is at a point when she physically attacks him. Okay, so I think that is a tacit admission.
So she's saying she didn't send that many, like, emails a minute, or?
Bro, I don't know what this bitch say, okay? At minute 38, she says, "Even if the email thing is true, the rest is not." Oops again, I guess. At minute 44, she says she had 6 email accounts and multiple phones. Morgan actually pushes back on this pretty good. It was like, why? And she says, I like to keep things separate for different things, like my different bills and different people. And he was like, I don't know anybody that has that much going on.
I don't even spend that much time on my hobbies.
What? Yeah. Good God. Let's see here. At minute 46, she says they were never friends. Okay. At minute 53, near the end of the interview, he asks again how many times they met. I don't know why. That was literally like one of the first things she said. But she changes her story to 5 or 6. Had they met during the interview? And they edited that part of the interview out? I am not sure. She's wearing the same clothes from beginning to end, so I have to assume maybe. If we're giving her the benefit of the doubt, to say she's not absolutely lying or crazy. Sometime after the interview, she demanded £1 million for Piers Morgan, stating that she had not been paid enough at the time. She also stated that she would be suing Gad and Netflix for defamation. Yeah, she apparently the character could not have been her. So that was one of the things she stated during the interview. This interview was the single worst thing she could have done for a court case.
Yeah, and for more clarification, Richard never said that she was this person.
She
has come out and said she was not this person.
For the record, since then, Richard actually said it's only part of that. It's actually an amalgamation of a few different things. And I think Martha, the character of Martha in the show, is really sugar-coated, but we'll get to that. Many online have said if she had not come out and outed herself, this would have blown over by now. I tend to agree with that.
The Streisand effect. The more you try to deny it and hide it, the more it comes out.
Yeah, and if she had just ignored it, not self-identified, maybe it would have gone away. She said she was being harassed online. I've seen no evidence of this. I'm not saying it didn't happen at all. Some people probably did say some things. The main points of contention in the show are, this is what she states: she never attacked his girlfriend. She never attacked him. She never heckled him at a show. She's never been to jail or been arrested for this. And I think the larger point is she never stalked him, which pretty obvious to that.
It's like the only way that is not true is if they at some point change the definition of what stalking is.
Yes. And that's the thing is, in England and Scotland, in the 90s, now this happened around 10 years ago, but in the 90s, it wasn't taken as seriously at all. There are laws and acts for it, but it clearly wasn't. Now, at the time of the interview, there was not a lawsuit yet. She had only stated in that interview that she intends to look into, or she was having people look into it. As to whether she was already or not, I do not know, but a lawsuit has been brought forward, as have other victims had already come forward to Piers Morgan. One of the things that tipped people off, if anything, was in the show, he found evidence that she had stalked other people before him. When it became apparent this was a serious situation. One of those people was Laura Ray, who's a barrister now, which is a type of lawyer in England. She had gotten, at the end of their ordeal, she had gotten what's called an interim interdict, which is basically their version of a restraining order. That would last for a year and a day. That was the end of this. I think her ordeal went on maybe longer than even Richard Gadd's. I think her situation was on and off for 5 years. I think Richard only dealt with her for maybe approximately like 3 years-ish. So she went on to Piers Morgan. Now, also, one of the other things was that it's almost laughably bad, and I don't want to laugh. I don't want to make fun of. I mean, I've made some jokes, and we're trying to have some fun here with this discussion, but when Pierce asks her, she answers some questions like so quickly, like she'd prepared for this, but some of them he literally took her off guard with. Like, did you ever write him any letters? No. But one of the questions he asks her was, probably were you in love with him? And she split seconds later says yes. Yes. Is that a serious question? No. It's sad. It really is sad when you think about how mentally deranged Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy were, that they needed help. I'm not comparing the two situations here. I just thought it was a pertinent time to bring up that when someone's mentally ill, it's sad no matter what the situation is. It's not, you have to find some dark humor in it to get through the day. You know, like if I weren't laughing, I'd be crying. And, you know, my dad always said, if crying would help, I'd do it. But when you spill your milk, you just got to clean it up. Laura Ray made the news because she was a very public person. They were involved in politics at the time, her and her husband, Jimmy Ray, who has since passed on. She went on Piers Morgan also. Now, the reason I mentioned the last little bit about the way that Fiona answered the questions is if you go on, you have to watch the whole thing. Don't watch a rundown and think that you got it. Because I was talking with some friends who had not watched the show. They had only seen like a TikTok clips of Fiona. And she said, yeah, I heard all this stuff about the show, but I watched it and she was actually really nice. Like these clips. And I'm like, yeah, if you watch it edited, but if you watch the full thing, you'll get the totality of and the crushing weight of that this is a disturbed woman. And she's not okay. And it's not only just the fact that she can't keep her story straight and that she changes it.
Something to keep in mind, too, is even if she's nice through this whole interview, that is one instance in like a snapshot.
Yeah, 1 hour of her life.
Yeah. That
was designed to kind of clear her name, given she self-outed and...
To clear her name that was not even
public
it was
knowledge. Fiona is not Martha. We will get to that, I promise you. I've got a section. Okay. Laura Ray goes on, and she had a law firm. She states that she started receiving emails from Fiona, and they were so personal and like heartfelt that she had assumed she had met her somewhere, that she already knew her and had forgotten, because they met a lot of people through the law firm, through the politics that her husband and she were involved in. And so she was like, oh, I'm really, almost I take it like almost jokingly, like friendly kind of, I'm so offended you haven't had me in the office yet. I was really hoping you'd take me on. And she said she felt bad because she was like, maybe this is a person I've known for some time and I've overlooked them somehow. So she gave her an opportunity. Now, here's the thing, because some people say Fiona claims she has a law degree and that this isn't true. She said, she's got her law degree, but it's not enough because you have to have a certain amount of training. It's like 2 years of working in a law office. Now, this is in England.
Even here, having a degree in law and passing the bar exam are not the same thing.
Right. So England's got the UK. Let's just simplify it to say the UK. Here in America, sometimes different cities and townships have different laws to each other. So I'll just bear that in mind when it comes to thinking about how they would handle a stalking situation and how various things are handled from state to state. We have like abortion laws are different state to state. So even though the UK greater area, which Fiona's from Scotland, Richard's from Scotland, some of this I think took place in England. I don't think everything strictly took place in Scotland, but I think a good portion of this did. But for the sake of clarity, in case I misspeak or have gotten any of this information wrong, the UK, the greater UK area. So she takes her on, and in this time that she has her working for, which is menial tasks, like answering the phone and stuff like that, she states, Laura Ray, she was inappropriate with a male member of staff. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. She followed a male member of staff home. She told people on the phone to go to a different law firm. She talked people into, yeah. There was also a man who had been disabled from having polio. I think he must have been pretty old. And she told him that everyone at the office said terrible things about him and made fun of him behind his back. She threw things at people. She got in arguments with people. And she was asked to leave after only 2 weeks. That was when she describes the situation, she goes into more detail in Pierce's interview. I lost track of how long it sounded like months. 2 weeks. The way that she describes it, very similar to some scenes in Baby Reindeer when they had to escort her out. She's made a scene in the building. She stayed outside the building for, she said, around 30 minutes plus, screaming at the building. She would begin calling and filling up her answering machine every day. She said on and off for up to 5 years. Like, it wasn't, for a long time it was every day, just filling it up with vague threats and other things. Eventually that tapered off, but went on for a total of 5 years. Laura was at some point contacted by another lawyer who had eventually taken on and subsequently fired Fiona. Fiona had apparently told the police he was abusing his children. So he comes home one day to social workers there. So he contacted Laura Ray. He must have known about her situation with him, and she said, I can't speak to anything that happened with you personally. All I can do is tell them exactly what happened with me and her. Sadly, this too would later happen to Laura, and this is where Richard's headline got put into the show. Later, she was physically stalked by Fiona when she needed to take some classes later on at Strathclyde University. She went to a professor to ask about the situation. They looked into it and found out Fiona wasn't even a student. So they couldn't do anything about it. And she's like, if she's not even a student, you can definitely ask her to leave. And he's like, we don't like to do that. So later on, she got a letter of apology from the university because Fiona ended up being a problem. She went on to harass members of staff. When that happened, she found out that Laura had also said something. They must have added that to the list of complaints when, I guess, banning her from campus or whatever, Fiona. When she found out that she had one more thing to hold a grudge against Laura Ray about, she did the same thing that she had done to this other anonymous lawyer. She contacted their version of Child Protective Services and said that she'd been abusing her disabled child. She used another student's name because when the social workers were there, she was like, okay, we'll look into this other lawyer. The same situation happened with him. Look into this. Who was it that said this? And they said the student's name. They went back, did some homework, contacted the student, and the student was like, I didn't have anything to do that. She'd used that student's name erroneously. They were able to backtrack it to Fiona. Obviously. It was at this point that she got the equivalent of a restraining order, which lasted a year and a day. Laura was hoping that she wouldn't know or understand the full weight of it, because she was like, if this all starts over a year from now, I'll just have to get another one. She either had gotten bored with the situation, didn't know that it wasn't permanent, or for any other reason, who knows what goes on inside of Fiona's head. But it was then that she left her alone. It had been 22 years since she had had anything to do with the situation. Now, Laura's not necessarily like happy about this all coming up and doing these interviews. Her husband has since died. Her son still, he has this chromosomal disorder. I don't know completely what is wrong with him. She still, has that to deal with. She claims she's a fairly robust woman. These are her words. But she said this has been incredibly difficult and stressful for her because she never knew completely what Fiona was capable of.
Yeah.
And I think
when she's going to come back and you finally got a break.
Yeah, she said that she had heard from possible false news reports, but that she was looking to buy a house in the area where she lives in, which really quite frightens her. She also points out for Martha's not the fictional character, but for Fiona's defamation case to move forward, you have to prove one of the things she's claiming is that it has injured her ability to seek employment. Well, you have to prove that you were a viable candidate for employment, that you had jobs previously to lose. She said, as far as I know, she's never worked. She's never been able to hold on to a job. And this is from her, like, going in and being unemployable, ruining her, sullying her good name.
Not only that, you have to open yourself to scrutiny.
Yeah.
So if the tension wasn't on you, it definitely is now.
I mean, when we look at the, extremely fair, the Heard versus Depp case, she had to answer for all of her actions within the situation. And then some of her own friends abandoned defending her, which was not necessarily a good look. Also, just her answers in the courtroom weren't enough to convince the jury. I think one of the claims they did award her was, from all of what she was asking, was like significantly reduced. I also want to mention, the show is, it's not just about, Fiona, his situation with Fiona. There was his entry into the world of stand-up comedy. He was also doing a lot of drama classes, which he said felt like a step backwards for what he wanted to do. It's about his life in his 20s.
Yeah.
So
and his struggles and...
Yeah. I think the show encompasses about 5 to 7 years, and this is compressed into 7 episodes. The reality of what he felt and what he went through, viewed from an artistic lens, will convey the nature of what he experienced at the time. How do you do that? How does one relate those things? Most of the time, you just write some fantastical story, and the dragon is an allegory for, drug use or whatever. Or, you can look at these things and say like, oh, the yellow brick road was blah, and insert negative or positive thing here and say that was, it's all meant for analysis in some pretentious college course 55 years later. How does one go about that? My point for all of this, if this isn't clear by now, is I want Richard to be able to tell his story. I want artists to be able to tell their story without, of course, if they're using real names, if they're leaving a roadmap to people to be harassed. Piers Morgan kept saying there was a duty of care. There was a duty of care from Richard Gadd and Netflix, and they failed that. I don't understand that. I'm not so dense that I don't understand this. I'm saying I don't understand that they don't understand this is a more complex situation than that. If artists are so bound by legal jargon that they can't even tell their own personal story of struggle, sexual abuse, being stalked, I don't think that you could convey in any realistic way to an audience what it's like to be stalked. Because it's not like, a husband beating a wife or vice versa. Like, I hit you and whatever. Not to downplay that, but you can show that.
Yeah.
But like, when somebody is emailing you constantly or texting you, she was using, when people think of emails, I think they think of like actually sitting down to write a modern day letter on, and it's more substantial. Like if you send a 5-page text, it's an email. That's what you'd go. Professional people use emails. She did not have his number. She did not have his phone number for a very long time, but he had his email because he was trying to be a comedian, so he had to have some information out there. She got a hold of his email pretty quickly and his Facebook, and so she would use his email like text. So she would just send really short messages. That's why it accumulated to the degree that it did, because some of them were 3 words long, and some of them were really long. Like, really long. Laura brought receipts. She brought the interdict. She said that she'd been contacted by Netflix. Again, she wasn't happy about being involved in this, but I believe that she is going to testify in the case. She was asked if she would be willing to sue Fiona, and she said, she was open to it, but what's the point? If you're looking for reparations, what's the point with somebody who doesn't have any money if she's never worked? It's pointless. I think the principle would be especially if you're a lawyer, like if you're capable of writing diss tracks and you did that, for money, and then it was just for fun one time. Like, throw one out there. I'm saying, like, if you lawyer all the time and then somebody comes and with you, and then I would just say, like, okay, I'm taking the day off to work. That's just me. But it's different culture and different type of people over there. All right, so she brought a lot of information, and at some point she had also assigned like panic alarms to her employees because she was making these threatening statements on their answering machines. So with all of the stuff that Richard Gadd has, we haven't seen any of it, except we have now, because he released a lot of it. Photos of the physical letters. Guys, I did not put in the time to decipher those hieroglyphs, but they're out there. If you want to check them out, they are out there. The YouTube channel Simply Said has stayed pretty on top of this, and there's another guy, Gary, I will look it up before the end of this because I definitely want to cite him too. He has stayed on top of it. He actually followed Martha, or no, sorry, not Martha, the real Martha, Fiona. He followed her on Facebook before she made her page private. So he still had access to it before all of this went down and she shut everybody out. And he can still see just how much she posts and would get on there and just read it, shouting into the void, much like I feel like I'm doing here some days. But this one was important to me because of artists' rights. That I feel like that's what I'm fighting for. I'm beating around the bush on this one because once the emails were written, I haven't found one person, one YouTuber who got a hold of these who would read them unedited, uncensored. They wouldn't even read the words and censor themselves later. They felt so embarrassed. They either abbreviated, skipped the words entirely, or just laughed and said, I can't say that. She switches between being extremely racist, homophobic, and threatening to Gadd, to complimenting Gadd, telling him how much she loves him, and bringing up his parents from time to time, which I think in and of itself is a threatening maneuver.
Yeah.
If I'm being overtly threatening to you at times, and then I just say, oh, and by the way, how's Martha doing? Referring to your mom. I don't know your mom's name, but there's a lot of moms out there that are named Martha. Both Batman and Superman's moms are named Martha. I'm just saying, is it a coincidence? Yes, it is. Laura Ray brought records. It was later, I don't know who brought this to light, but Keir Starmer, who has become the current Prime Minister of England. I don't know, this was like maybe 10 or 20 years ago, maybe longer. She sent him, and bear in mind also, he was in politics, but she wasn't one of his constituents. This would be like me emailing like Bernie Sanders for stuff that has to do specifically with Kentucky and not, I want to say Delaware, maybe? But even if it had to do with Delaware, what does it matter? I don't live there. She sent him 376 emails. And she insults his family, his wife. It's very telling. Okay, this is one of the ones that I actually. This was actually released. Some of it is they went through it with the black Sharpie.
Redact.
Yeah. Kier, cut the crap with me, you stupid little boy. You get elected leader of non-party, and within 2 minutes, I get an email calling me a racist from the housing. I've already comperished about you. Oh yeah. If you haven't seen the show, there is a staggering amount of showing the emails and the texts and tweets, but there's a lot of misspelling and grammatical inconsistencies. So if I sound like I'm stumbling through this, it's only partially because I'm illiterate. Some of it is because there's misspellings to the point where I'm not sure what she was trying to say, and I can't tell from context clues. Okay. See, from now on, I'll complain about the slightest little thing. Your life won't be worth living. That's frightening. You do all about anything, and all I get is abuse every 2 minutes of the day from your non-party. I'm sick to the back of my teeth. Sent from my iPhone. Well, that's not great.
She seems like a lovely woman.
There was another person who went on, I'm not going to get into this too much, but there was another guy who was involved in Parliament. His name's George Galloway. He went on Piers Morgan and said that she started stalking him, and this is in the late 80s. And he said at first he thought that she was just into him, and then he realized that she's not. She's into his job, and that she actually, because she was going to run for some, I don't know exactly all the different levels of their government or their government system in England. I am American. I live in America. I'm more versed with our system. So I don't know exactly how that works over there, what you run for, what you have to do to try and get into government. But that is another thing that that's why she takes government so seriously, or it's just another thing to get obsessed with. Let's see here. So one of the things that I did want to mention too is the internet sleuths. Now that we've talked about all these people, everyone, the main people who've come forward, Richard Gadd, Laura Ray, George Galloway, the ones that Richard Gadd has not done an interview on Piers Morgan, but he's also done, this started as a comedy routine. It was dramedy, you know. It was
like a stage show.
You did 2 performance pieces, one called Monkey See, Monkey Do, where he was on a treadmill, and a lot of the show was pre-recorded, and it was supposed to be like the thoughts in his head, the negative thoughts in his head. I've not seen this. I've a tiny portion of it, like a preview. Look, I'm not saying we go to the black market. I just want to see this show if it's recorded, and you can't watch it anywhere. So if anybody knows where I can legally watch it, let me know. He also did a show called Baby Reindeer. It was a stage show where he had a seat on stage with him and treated it as though it were the Martha character. So with the emails that were in the show, there's only 1 or 2 minor vague references to her being racist. But if you go and read some of these emails, I'm not even going to touch them here. Other YouTubers are far more established. I'm not taking chances on reading such racist things. But she refers to herself as a racist. It's in there. You have to dig through this, but it is so racist and so homophobic. It's disgusting. It's genuinely horrific. These people are the dregs of society. And it's disgusting to me. It really bothers me. And this is when I really get to say, I don't know why Richard didn't go harder on this. This is where I firmly believe he was trying to protect her identity, because he could have made the character, let's be fair, to her, play devil's advocate for a second. He finds a woman, an actress who's heavyset. They have different colored hair, but only slightly. And she's also Scottish. Dresses are like the woman dressed, you know. And because Jessica Gunning, the woman who portrayed Martha, is such a good actress, she didn't even need to spend any time with her. It looks like she's method acting. Once you see both of them, it's insane how good a job. She deserves every award for this, and I hope her career propels after this. You will recognize her from the Adipose episode of Doctor Who.
Oh yeah,
that was she's the one who Donna goes to see at her house, and then
completely forgot about that.
So I think he really sugarcoated this character, and that's, could he have made her a Japanese woman, a thin woman, an American? He could have done all those things. He didn't. I don't think he really had this in mind, that it was going to blow up into this storm.
Because Fiona accused him of sensationalizing, which, obviously, there is some of that in there. But to his credit, he does not make himself look good.
No,
he is the victim, but he is not showing himself as a victim.
Yes, I'm really glad you mentioned that. This is something that we discussed like during the show, in between episodes. Every step of the way, he shows himself making the absolute worst decisions a human can make. Like, he doesn't victimize anybody else, but he definitely isn't the hero of this. He's not the bad guy, but when it comes to doing dumb, stupid things, he does every one of them.
Very self-destructive tendencies.
Yeah, he makes, he goes places he shouldn't go. He does things he shouldn't do. He does dumb things, and he doesn't stand up for himself in the way that he should. He's not cruel, and that's part of the thing, is he kind of goes with the flow on a lot of stuff and is a bit of a doormat.
It's almost like he's punishing himself for these decisions.
After a certain point, because the way that the show deserves every award it's gotten, it was so expertly written and executed. It's not told in a linear fashion. We start at a point when a fair bit of trauma has already taken place to him, and it gets back to that later in further episodes. There's episodes that are almost entirely take place years prior to the story at hand that is only hinted at other times, and it fills in the gaps and the pieces as you go along. Could he have done that? Sure. But how do you, that's the one thing that I maintain is slightly indefensible. However, he did not use her real name, and he sugarcoated quite a bit of this. And when it comes to, we come full circle back to post-show, the show premieres, people track her down. Somebody maybe sends her a message and says, "Are you Martha?" Just to see. I'm just saying, hypothetically, this is what she claims took place. Think about the spill out and fallout and the splash damage that happened from Laura Ray. Everybody that worked in her office, all of the students that were at that university where she was stalking her at, all the people who were involved with that, the staff members who were harassed by her, the people who worked at the Holly Arms with Richard at the bar that he worked at, the people who witnessed what happened to him when she came and disrupted his comedy shows. George Galloway, I don't even know. I didn't want to get too much into his case. That feels like you're getting into the weeds there, and it took place a long time ago. But it's important enough to mention because these serious people have had issues with this. How many other people have remained anonymous that just don't want to deal with it or weren't affected enough to say, like, it was a real thing?
Maybe not like the constant harassment, but like just one-off interactions.
Yeah. Enough to say, I definitely witnessed that, or God, I dodged a bullet there. So maybe some of these people, I'm just saying, hypothetically, I'm not saying this happened or didn't happen, but these internet sleuths, maybe some of them weren't sleuths. Maybe some of them were just people that had their finger on a button for 30, 20, 10, 5 years, wanted to remain anonymous, didn't know what to do, and opened a door and said, there you go, have at it. Just to have some poetic justice to it, because this woman has not had any accountability taken. So this is a minor spoiler. If you're still with us, she is shown to be, in the show, she has justice dispensed upon her. She's arrested for stalking and making terroristic threatening messages about him and his family, which she claims never happened. She claims she was never arrested for any of this. I almost think that too is saying this is not her. This is based on other accounts. This is something that is sensationalized. And that argument can and will be made by Netflix in a court of law. Although a portion of the case has been thrown out. I don't want to get too into the technical jargon, but a portion of the case has been thrown out. Some of it is still moving forward. Richard Gadd is not personally being sued, but this will set a dangerous precedent for artists moving forward. Artists like Taylor Swift, who every bit of her albums in recent years is about real people, real situations that did happen. With this, it is still, she maintains, Fiona, she maintains she was never arrested and she never did any time in jail, and that this defames her. Okay. Well, she did have a restraining order on her, so there was legal action taken against her. I'm not saying that is the same thing, but I don't think it's a false equivalency. There is also, and I just want to put this out there are some claims out there that I think have yet to be substantiated, so take this with a grain of salt, and also allegedly, but that she did some time in a mental institution of some sort. Now, if this is the case, sometimes here in America, people, instead of jail time, they go to mental facilities or rehab facilities of some type. There's all sorts of ways that people have house arrest. People have community service. There are all sorts of ways people are reprimanded. I don't know. And also the laws in England keep people's records much more private. So I think it's much more difficult to find out. Don't know if she wants to take this all the way to court. The last thing that I want to say about this, coming full circle to the end of the show, is a male sexual abuse charity has seen a staggering 80% increase in first-time callers since the release of Baby Reindeer. This was immediately afterward. In the 2 weeks that followed Baby Reindeer, 53% of referral cited the show as the reason for calling. and 80% in overall increase in calls following its release. Now, this is for male abuse, something that historically and statistically males do not report abuse. There are places for them to do that, but even in there's so many public accounts of people who have come forward in a public way later, not to the police, but to the public, to say, I did go to the police. I did alert people to my situation, and I was laughed out of there. Or I was just, rebuffed to say, I mean, look at you. Like Terry Crews, who's talked about the situation. You look at Terry Crews, he's a mountain of a man. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What is one to do?
Like with Brendan Fraser, ruined his career. Only just now getting back.
So I think the show has done more good than harm. I don't think it's really done any harm. To who has it done harm to? She speculates it's done harm to her, but I think that if you argue this out, it hasn't really done anything to her. All it's done is given an alleged narcissist. Of course, I cannot diagnose anyone, but I'm saying from my point of view, she ticks all the boxes live on air. And again, allegedly, I can't diagnose her. It's just what it looks like to me. You're giving somebody who wants attention. She got exactly what she wanted. An international, worldwide stage. That is Piers Morgan was well known, and he's done interviews, and I mean, he's internationally known, but his YouTube channel broke its own numbers with that interview alone and put him on the map in a way that he hadn't been before, just from Richard Gadd's work.
And if there was any damage to her, she has done it to herself, because even if there were people that were trying to out her, if she had not said anything, because they did not approach her for an interview with Piers Morgan, she approached them, correct?
Yeah.
So I got a little buzz. She could just say no, wasn't me. And I assume that most people would be like us and be like, well, shit, that sucked for him, and then move on.
Yeah.
Instead, we're having this full-blown conversation about it right now and making a whole episode out of it. Whereas the show might not even been on our radar, or watched it for what it was and then passed on.
I wouldn't have. I had already made the decision not to watch it because I can get sucked into true crime as much as anybody.
It's like I hadn't even heard of it until you said something.
When I find myself watching, I watched a guy get murdered from somebody's what do you call them? Not the dash cam, but the body cam.
Yeah.
That on YouTube. It's all censored, but it's still like beyond that fuzzy wall. I hear his wife screaming. It wasn't even a cop. It was a security guard in a Lowe's parking lot for nothing. That stays with a man, okay? Like this on a Sunday afternoon, Allison comes down to check on me, and I was like, security guards. And she's like, what are you watching? I'm like, I don't know. Take my phone away from me. I can't trust myself. I have enough anxiety and depression and stress without looking into finding more. I'd rather be laughing. I'd rather have put on just a mindless comedy. Do I? No, I'm doing research for this podcast. Having said that, I want to put the number down. I want to look up numbers for, similar charities and organizations here. Not just for suicide prevention or battered women and abused women and children, but also for men, because it's important that men be able to speak out. It's, when people laugh at a situation like Johnny Depp, yeah, she beat his ass. When you're a guy, certain guys are, and it's even on, God, I can't remember if it was Steve Harvey it was Dr. Phil. This woman blatantly admits to hitting the guy, and he's up there saying, well, you never hit a woman. And just giving her carte blanche to be able, and for every woman watching it, right? We're told in America, and probably around the world, well, not every culture, but don't hit women, no matter what they do. Frying pan, tire iron, fist, knifing you. Don't hit back, don't fight back. That's just our code of ethics. And I'm not saying do. I am saying, what did Johnny Depp do? He'd lock himself in the bathroom, and then she would make fun of him for it. And there's audio recorded evidence of this.
And for us, that almost becomes spectacle. But what about people that don't have resources? They don't have the money.
Johnny Depp is rich. He could eventually, that the other thing she made fun of him for was going to one of his other houses he owned to escape her. And yet again, she was making fun of him for this, and it's recorded. But what about regular everyday people who don't have the wherewithal to go? And if you're in a marriage, or maybe it's boyfriend, girlfriend, but you just don't have anywhere else to go. That's your home. Where do you go? What do you do? And if you go to the police and they just laugh at you because it's a bunch of like alpha dogs that are, maladjusted. Not every police officer, I'm just saying. On the whole, that's the culture. That's the culture that we cultivate in policing. You go in to report something and they're like, but look at you. You're a huge guy. Yeah, but I'm not. If I hit the woman, if I flick her ear.
Then who becomes the victim and who's going to get the hammer dropped on them?
Yeah. If you don't have the resources to go somewhere, what do you do? There are places, though, that will take you seriously, that are designed to take you seriously. They have a different culture than the regular police, and they will take your account, get the evidence that you have, and you can move forward from there. As to what happens, I don't know. Every situation is different, but there are places. We live in Kentucky. I'm sure there are nationwide ones that you can call. And there's even crisis hotlines that are just extremely generic for anything that will, determine whether or not you're on the ledge or you're at home and you're just having a really hard time and you need some help.
But they'll put you in contact with whatever you need. And
there is, I just wanted to also shout out Gary828 is the guy who has been on top of reading the emails and her Facebook accounts, and is a lot of his channel is just going over not even the facts of the case, just her words, just to keep those out there, keeping it exposed so that people can see and make up their minds for themselves. Like, don't take my word for it. Watch the show. And then watch the interviews. Don't listen to anybody else. Like, you can see when somebody comes on and says, well, Laura Ray, she doesn't even know the name of her own law firm. It's L and L. And then Laura Ray can be confronted with that information and say, like, well, that's nonsense. Of course I know the name of my law firm, and take you through the history of it and how over time it merged with another law firm and then was merged again with another law firm, and that the names changed several times. Of course, serious, intelligent people know their own information. There's also, Simply Said, English kid who does some pop culture media. He's been staying abreast on this case as well, and I think he's been extremely fair. He'll call it for what it is as he's looking at it, but he's just mostly recording the facts of the case as they're presented to him. He shows his face. He seems like a nice, amiable kid. This Gary, he is. It's pretty clear, and he'll add in a few comments once in a while about the things that are said, but he reads the emails, he reads the Facebook account, and I don't think there's any tweets. It's rough, man. It's a hard sell, but I'm not saying this woman deserves to be behind bars. I'm just saying she needs to have some accountability taken, because I think that the kind of, how do you show when somebody pushes you beyond your limit? When it's constant, day and night, and you don't know when they're going to be, where they're going to be, disrupting your personal life.
Or how many of the threats are idle. And
yeah, when you work at a regular place, but then you're trying to do something with yourself in your extracurricular time, and you can't escape them because they show up there too. And then they're sending you stuff about that. Either telling you how good you were last night or how shite you were last night. And it never ends. And it's so all-encompassing. And you realize that they're deranged or there's something wrong with them in some way, but what are you going to do? And in both cases, Laura Ray contacted the police, said they were basically useless and didn't do anything. Richard Gadd his account includes going to the police. In case you think, well, why didn't he just go to the police? He did. And again, they didn't do anything. He was pushed to trying some more extreme measures by his own account. At some point, he tried to record her and that didn't work either, because that can be viewed as entrapment, which got him into a tiny bit of trouble with them as well. So there we are. The case is going forward. She has sued Netflix. She has not sued GAD, so far as I know, as of the recording of this. However, I think it is paramount that we protect artists. If he had doxed her, we have YouTubers. Like, swatting people is a real thing. Doxing people is a real thing. Politicians do this. YouTubers do this. He didn't do this.
No.
I don't think it was the same thing. And as Dave Chappelle said, if he did, you know, I mean, all right. If anybody has stayed this long, I want to personally thank you. This was one that was important to me because I have a lot of respect for Richard Gadd coming forward and writing the thing that he did. I don't know that I would have done it any differently. In fact, I have. It's made me more introspective and reflective about the things I have written, because I have written a personal account, but I have sensationalized and fictionalized it to the point where it is a fantasy story with robots, vampires, and the like. Having said that, there are things in there that I think people would still see themselves in and take very personally the things that I have put to page. And it's made me really think about that. It's also really made me think about just trying to form friendships. Like, it's made me really paranoid about that. Like, how does one form friendships with people like us that don't get out much, have a difficult time meeting people, have a difficult time making friends? And in this fast-paced world, sometimes you lose track of people you honestly just have a connection with.
I find the best way is to wait till your significant other makes friends and then befriend their significant others and start a podcast with them.
Right, yeah. Well, that's worked out so far. So, words to live by. If any of you out there are really having trouble meeting people, finding people, if your significant other has friends at work, go on a couple's date night and maybe suggest you guys start a podcast with the other person. So, yeah, I mean, I had some crisis moments. I will say this. Cut out that one story that I told you earlier. Do that for sure. But leave this one in, because I have, I meet people through, like, me doing magic and mentalism, and it's a relatively small community. Even the famous people in it, like Max Maven is one of the godfathers of modern mentalism and kind of kept it alive in the 70s and 80s. And anybody could email him. I never did, but anybody could. And he would, however small a response he would give, he would usually give a response, and sometimes he would even give a longer, more thought out response. So most magicians will, because they know they're like G-list celebrities, even if they're big. I'm not saying go email David Blaine, but the ones out there that are reasonably well known will respond back to you. It might not end up being a correspondence. You might not end up becoming pen pals, but they will, if you have a question, they will at least respond to you, because they're generally real people. Usually also maladjusted nerds, the other end of the spectrum, the opposite of police. So how does one, I've heard all these stories about like, I started writing letters to this person in the 70s and then they became friends, or at least like long distance, like colleagues. How do you do that now without becoming a baby reindeer? And it really bothered me. There's this guy that I met at a memorial for the proprietor of a magic shop. I hope he never hears this, but he might, and I don't mind if this stays in. And when you're someone like me on the spectrum, and I'm a bit much, if you've listened to any of this if this is your first podcast, it's like this all the time. I don't know what to tell you, but that's, I'm a bit much sometimes. I don't have an off button, and I try. It's hard to find people that you really get me, and then like, oh, we're best buds now, best buds forever. But we talked a bit. He gave me his number even, and I was like, oh my god, you're crazy. You gave me your number? I thought it was just you could ignore me on Instagram. But he invited me up and got me and Allison lunch one time, and we performed a few tricks for each other, and he even brought me down to where he worked at, because he works for place that, I mean, he's a public figure to a degree. He works for a place where he gets farmed out to do magic shows and mentalism shows. So he brought me down there and introduced me to some of the people he worked with, and it was pretty cool. Like me, I thought I found a kindred spirit because he wrote really long texts, and I write really long texts. I'm just very detail-oriented when it comes to discussing certain things. And when that's the only way you're talking, I think details are important. When I'm talking to my girlfriend, even then sometimes we write longer texts, but sometimes it's easier just to call, which is what we do. We live with each other, so we talk all the time. But he had a personal incident that happened with him, and then he kind of dropped off a bit. And I internalized that. There's a lot of Venn diagram in between area with like autism and narcissism, because it's hard not to think when something goes wrong, we blame ourselves. So we internalize that and make everything about us, but in a bad way, as opposed to the other thing. So I just assumed like, oh, he stopped talking to me because he like spent some time with me, right? Well, then one day I hear from him, and he had told me the story of the thing that happened. I'm not going to say the thing that happened to him. It kind of sucked. It wasn't like life-threatening or anything, but it wasn't good. And he was having to start some stuff over in his life. I hope he's doing better now, but, you know, he kind of trailed off. And I thought, did I baby reindeer this guy? Did I message him too much? Were we going back and forth? And Allison reminded me, like, no, look, he was responding to you. He was talking to you. And I was like, yeah, I don't. So I don't have a good resolution for this. I don't think, and then that's the other thing too, is just finding out if and when you're friends. In this modern day age, like with the thing that happened with him, it is very plausible that he has a hard time keeping up with his real friends, you know, like the people he knows in real life, not just the people he just meets on the road. And he's extremely busy. Maybe it's not personal, but maybe I'm a little too much sometimes. And I know that that has happened too. So I don't have a good resolution for that situation or the story, really. Just to say, if you're out there and you have a similar experience, or if you have difficulty with these situations, also, I see you, I hear you, leave a comment, and it sucks. If there's somebody that you know that you can talk with about that, just don't stay quiet about that. Get it off your chest and get an unbiased person's perspective and find out. Make sure that you haven't, like, you know, gone overboard. If you really think you have, most likely you're being too hard on yourself. Nobody wants to be the next baby reindeer. Of course, I know that I'm using it the wrong way around. And I'm not going to spoil what the baby reindeer is, why she called him baby reindeer. It doesn't get revealed until the end of the show, and it kind of puts a nice, poignant, extremely sad bow on the whole thing. And with that, I think I'm done.
If you made it with us this far, thank you. A lot to unpack here. Don't really know what to tell you to comment, but if you want to say something, feel free to comment. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We'll leave links in the description below. And until next time, see ya.